Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Petaluma Mayoral and City Council Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce and the Petaluma Argus Courier. I'm Matt Brown. I'm the editor of the Argus Courier, and I'll be the moderator of tonight's forum. Along with the Chamber, I'd like to thank the Hotel Petaluma for providing tonight's venue, and Cure Energy Productions for the technical support. I'd also like to thank our candidates, who are running for 3 open seats on the Petaluma City Council, as well as the open mayor's seat. Civic engagement is clearly alive and well in Petaluma this year, as we have 10 highly qualified candidates for those 4 leadership positions. We'll meet them in a moment, but first I want to read the rules for how we will proceed tonight. The seating of the candidates and the order of participation was determined by drawing of lots. We will start with 1-minute opening statements by each candidate. The timekeeper will ensure candidates don't go over their allotted time. After opening statements, I will ask the first question to the candidate seated in the first position. The candidate will have 60 seconds to answer the question. Then the candidate seated in the second position will answer the same question, and so on until all the candidates have answered the first question. The candidate seated in the second position will be the first to answer the second question, and the forum will proceed with each successive candidate being the first to answer each successive question. We will try and get to as many questions as possible. At the conclusion, the 7 city council candidates will be allowed 1 minute each for a closing statement. Then we will take a 5-minute break and reconvene with a few questions for just the mayoral candidates. Each mayoral candidate will then make their 1-minute closing statement. Each candidate has had an opportunity to read these rules in advance and has agreed to be bound by them. And now let's meet the candidates. Please hold your applause until after all the introductions. An attorney and incumbent city councilman Dave King, volunteer healing consultant and youth sports coach mayoral candidate Brian Powell, incumbent city councilwoman and mayoral candidate Teresa Barrett, planning commissioner and council candidate Scott Alonzo, civil engineer and Parks and Rec Commission chair, council candidate Kevin McDonald, transportation technician and tree advisory committee member, council candidate Robert Conklin, physician, professor, and council candidate Dennis Posake, nonprofit consultant and council candidate Delinda Fisher, business executive and former city councilman, mayoral candidate Mike Harris, mortgage broker and former transit advisory committee chair, council candidate Michael Regan. Please join me in welcoming the candidates. And we'll begin with 1-minute opening statements. Dave King.
Thank you.
Can you stand, please?
Stand, please. Can you hear me?
No.
All right. That's not my problem. What's going on? Is this now? Right. Now you can hear me. My name's Dave King. I'm running for City Council. I've been a 27-year resident of Petaluma. I've lived here with my wife Lynn. We've raised our 2 daughters here. I have a business downtown. I'm a lawyer. I've operated a practice representing employees in civil rights cases for 30 years. Prior to being on the council, I have served on many nonprofits. I coached 31 girls sports teams over the course of 16 years. On the council, I've served on every commission but the Airport Commission, several of its committees. I've been Petaluma's representative on Sonoma Clean Power, on the Water Advisory Board for the county. I think when you look at the people who write about me or endorse me, one of the things I look at is I listen to all sides of the issues. I don't have a slant when I come in to make my decisions. I'm open-minded, and I do what I think is best for the city of Petaluma. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Powell.
Good evening. Petaluma is my home. I love Petaluma. I was born and raised in this beautiful town. My parents were born and raised in this beautiful town. My son is currently being raised in Petaluma. Petaluma is still an amazing place to raise a family. With that being said, quality of life is rapidly dwindling. The reason I'm here before you this evening is the fact that it pains me immensely to see our town being destroyed at every level due to poor leadership, greed, private interests, lack of accountability, and irresponsible decision-making. The last 10 years of Petaluma politics have significantly affected Petaluma in a negative, harmful, and unhealthy downward manner. Our town, our community, has been jeopardized. My goal, my plan, my hope is to first stop, then work on reversing the mess we have gotten into. The time to get back on the right path is now.
Thank you. Teresa Barrett.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. I'm Teresa Barrett, and I'm a candidate for the mayoral seat, which is open. And I have been serving on the council for 12 years, and before that I was on the planning commission for 6 years. I have lived here and raised my family here for 39 years, almost 40 years, and for 20 of those years I have been involved in Petaluma's government. I have been in the minority most of my time on the council, and I would like to see that change so that we can actually put into practice projects and programs that were adopted almost 20 years ago that really work on Petaluma being a walkable and sustainable city, a community that just meets everybody's needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott Alonso.
Good evening. My name is Scott Alonso. I'm currently on the Planning Commission. I'm the Vice Chair. And professionally, I am the Public Information Officer for the District Attorney's Office in Contra Costa County. I have a background in local government and also at the state level. Prior to my work for the District Attorney, I was the Public Information Officer for our County Health Department here in Sonoma County. So I'm committed to public service and giving back. It's really important to me, and I'm excited to be in this field with all these candidates because Petaluma has a lot of challenges ahead, but we also have a lot of opportunity. We need to work on fixing our roads, making sure people can afford to stay here, looking after our environment, implementing long-standing plans that we've had on the books for decades, like our river access plan, integrating our waterways. We can do more, and I'm happy to be a voice at the table, and more importantly, I want to be a voice for you. So please go to my website, find my email, my postcards are back there, get in touch with me, and let's chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin McDonald.
Good evening. My name is Kevin McDonald, and I've lived in Petaluma for over 30 years. I've raised my 4 children here in town. And when they were young, I participated in all the things you expect of young parents, scout groups, church groups, school groups. Found myself in leadership, especially in sports efforts. And after running the Petaluma Youth Soccer League for a number of years, I figured out we needed more fields. I helped run a campaign to build fields in town, mobilize that, which we've been very successful at. But further, as my children got older, I got into other topics around the city, especially the rate of growth and what people knew. And I felt that the citizens went away unsatisfied from discussions with the city about how growth worked. So I formed a forum group, in educational forums so citizens could be involved. You find if you're in education for very long, soon you're an advocate. So that built into what's the next step for an advocate on housing policy? City council. And I think I'm uniquely qualified as a civil engineer for city-type projects. And I hope you'll vote for Kevin McDonald.
Thank you. Robert Conklin.
Hello. Hello, I'm Robert Conklin. I'm running for City Council. I think most of us can agree here that Petaluma is the greatest city on this earth. I have lived here my entire life, grandparents through parents. We've been here for a while. And I'd like to stay here. I grew up on the west side. I now live on the east side. I'm a homeowner, which I bought at a very young age, and it's been a little tough. I have 2 children and a beautiful wife. myself and my wife commute in opposite directions. I go to San Francisco, she goes to Santa Rosa, so we don't even get to use the commuter lane together, which is a big shame. I'd like to be the voice for working families, being a working family man myself, and I just want to get in there. And since we're all working hard to stay in Petaluma, I think it's about time somebody's in City Council working hard for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Posake.
Oh, sorry. Hello, I'm Dennis Posake. I'm a candidate for Petaluma City Council. I've been in Petaluma 27 years with my wife and 2 children, and I'm a retired physician. I also have undergraduate and graduate degrees in engineering. As a physician, I've learned to not just listen to people, but to hear them as they talk about their serious and complex problems. And I have considered many complex and complicated decisions in regard to diagnosis and treatment. I don't want to give you false hope or make promises, but I think that our problems are complex and they require complex solutions. Sometimes the medicine doesn't taste very good, but I think it's what we need to do to keep Petaluma special and healthy.
Thank you. Delinda Fisher.
Hi, good evening. Delinda Fisher. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see this many people engaged. Candidate for City Council. So I have the skills and the knowledge and the experience to support you on the dais. I have 25 years urban planning experience working as a consultant to both commercial and nonprofit housing developers. I've also sat on the Planning Commission, so I bring both sides of the dais to my experience. In the last 5 years, I've worked as a nonprofit consultant for environmental groups, profits that work in sustainability. I sit on the board of the United States Green Building Council, our local chapter. I'm also a member of the Sonoma County Food Systems Alliance. I'm also a fellow of the Leadership Institute for Ecology and Economy. I'm really proud of the 10 endorsements I've received from various organizations around this county, including the Democratic Club, the Sierra Club, Conservation Action, Latino PAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Harris.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you to the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce and Petaluma Argus Courier and Hotel Petaluma, and especially this amazing venue to be here tonight to talk about the issues facing our community. My name is Mike Harris. I'm running for mayor here in town. I know we'll be talking about a lot of issues tonight, so if there's any issue you need to follow up on, my information's in the back. My home number is 773-3196, and my website is harrisforpetaluma.com with all my contact information on there. So I would love to hear any follow-up questions you may have after the discussion we have for this next 2 to 2.5 hours. So thank you very much. I would be honored with your support.
Thank you. Michael Regan.
All right, I'm not sure I'm ready to give out my home phone number yet, but but I'm Michael Regan and I'm running for Petaluma City Council. So I moved to Petaluma in 1992, went to Petaluma Junior High and Petaluma High School, and I really feel like I've grown up with Petaluma. I'm just seeing how this city has changed over that time. It's been amazing. And so, you know, it's with that I guess to me, you know, community service is so important, and that's why I've been involved in the Petaluma Host Lions Club, started the Young Professionals Network. I was just the chair this last fiscal year of the Transit Advisory Committee for the City of Petaluma. And I've also been on the board of the Petaluma Educational Foundation. I was just the president this last fiscal year. So it's really important to be involved in community service, and that's really what led me to running for City Council. And it's one of those things, walking door to door, talking with people, seeing what the most important issues are. Oh, I'm missing the camera, sorry. Talking about what the most important issues are, just real quick: public safety, then housing for young families, seniors, and working people, infrastructure, including Rainier Crosstown Connector, and I'm out of time, so I'll tell you that in a second.
Thank you, and now we will get to those issues, starting right now with the first question. First question, we'll start with Dave King. The answers will be 1 minute each, and then we'll just go down the line. Question 1. The median home price in Petaluma is $700,000, and the median rental price is $3,000 per month. Meanwhile, the homeowner vacancy rate is less than 1%, and the rental vacancy rate is around 2%. Housing prices are expected to increase as demand outpaces supply, and many working families are becoming priced out of the city. What is your plan to solve the housing crisis and generate more affordable housing in Petaluma?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very important question. In the course of my first term on the council, back about a month ago, we passed an amendment to the Affordable Housing Ordinance that effectively will require developers to provide 15% of their housing that's constructed on site or pay a substantial fee into our housing fund so that we can finally get affordable housing in this town through our affordable housing program. We've also loosened the restrictions on accessory dwelling unit construction to allow for granny units throughout the town. That's what we've done in the last 2 to 3 years. Going forward, we need to look at ways to incentivize developers to start constructing smaller units so that their market rates are a bit lower, both in terms of for purchase housing and for rentals. And we need to be realistic about what we can do regarding height restrictions in certain parts of the town that will also incentivize some of these folks to build more and at a rate that people can pay.
Thank you. So this is an issue that I'm still unclear on how to resolve. I'm not for growth in Petaluma. I'd like to see no more people come until we can figure out a way to deal with the infrastructure. So at the current time, I'm not quite sure, without building more homes in a community that's already overpopulated, how I'm going to get the numbers down for people to be able to afford it. I'm hoping to reach out to some professionals and get more information regarding this. But as of now, I don't have a fix for the problem.
Thank you. David just outlined what we have already been able to achieve on the city council, and I want to add to that that it was not easy. There was a real fight to get that done because the majority on the council had to be pulled over to realize how important it is to have housing that is affordable for people to live here, because it is important for us as a community to have the people who work here actually be able to live here, to have businesses be able to find people who can work in their stores, can teach in the schools, can work at the hospital or other medical centers. Have them live here and have that kind of quality of life. It is a first step that we've taken, but it's a small first step, and we need to work in partnership with the governor for the solutions to housing affordability.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, for the question. I'm one of the only renters running right now for city council, so I understand the real challenges every day as someone who's trying to make ends meet, making my rent payments with my housemates. And it's tough. If you look statewide, from 2006 to 2016, the median rent statewide went up 13%, median income only went up 4%. Overall, this is a poverty problem. We are not providing enough for working families. We need to support opportunities for more job growth and support folks who are making ends meet. That's a challenge. It's a global problem, but we can make a difference here in Petaluma. Like my colleagues here on the council have stated, the inclusionary housing ordinance that was passed, I helped advocate for that on the Planning Commission, requiring units, 5 or more, to have 15% affordable housing. That's going to make a big dent starting next year into our problem, and we certainly can do more at the state level by getting a new form of redevelopment in. We need it. When redevelopment was taken away, we lost our local control and local funding to build more affordable housing.
Thank you.
I entered the city council race because I believe that housing policy is everything. It's on. And I believe that everything that we have in our environment now is the result of the policy we've done. If we want to have different results than what we have environmentally or traffic-wise, we need different housing policy. So we need to step right into that. As I led a Know Before You Grow, one of our environmental housing forums, and we asked the developer, what is your vision for these apartments that you're bringing online? And the developer said, my vision is to rent them, nothing more. The city has to provide the vision. That's why I commend the existing city council for having come to the 15% inclusion and say, it's a nice start. It's not adequate. And it's very difficult to take the next step, but it's essential that we take the next step. And that's why you need to be able to talk to a developer and find out what makes it work Further, our city council has loosened the rules on accessory dwelling units, and that's a good thing. But we need to have a metric. How many applications came in? Did that rule change actually help?
Thank you.
This is important.
Oh, 1 minute. This is such a delicate topic. I would have to say the 15% is good. I'd like to see it more about 20% inclusionary housing. Also upping developer fees, because most of the developers have been saying that doesn't pencil out for them, but you know who it doesn't pencil out for? The working families of Petaluma. And I'd really like to see more inclusionary housing and start working with like Habitat for Humanity or PEP Housing, which is a nonprofit or for less profit, to get homes built for families and have it affordable for them. And if maybe work out a program with the developer to get Petaluma people who lived here for years, maybe a deferred down payment so we can get people into buying homes, not just renting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All I can do is be stronger. While we sit here talking, people are moving out of Petaluma. Families are moving out of Petaluma. Everyone agrees it's a crisis. No one's taking much action. I agree the city council took a good first step, but let's consider something else. 2 people in this town working full-time for minimum wage can't find a roof. Something's wrong with that system, and we have to turn over every stone looking to solve this problem. Beyond that, I would advocate for a just cause eviction ordinance as soon as possible if I'm elected. And I think it's also very important for the city council to certainly consider and pass an extension of the 10% emergency cap on rents that the governor put into effect after the fires. In my opinion, we're still in a state of emergency. Thanks.
I'd like to acknowledge my landlord in the audience here. So as an urban planner, I actually have a vision for Petaluma. And at the turn of the century, when our downtown was built, our forefathers really understood what they were doing. They put retail on the street, on the front. They put housing and workspaces above. I'd like to extend that mixed use that we have in our downtown along our transit corridors and within our transit cores. So build more mixed use housing that provides retail on the front, on the street, so it's walkable, with housing above, with workspaces beyond. We can go up to 5 stories, we can have 2 stories on the street, so it's incredibly walkable and livable, and then provide that housing and those workspaces above for people that don't have to rely on their vehicles. I'd also like to agree with Dennis. I support tenant eviction. I mean, don't evict our tenants. And also rent control. So I'm supporting Prop 10 so that we put the control in our hands of local jurisdictions.
Thank you. So this is one of the biggest issues facing our community. We have so many people fleeing the area, unfortunately, and that becomes a drain on the workforce for the businesses as well. So it's a circular issue that kind of continues. So I agree with some of the sentiments already stated and what the council has recently done in terms of the inclusionary housing changes in terms of the formula, and of course accessory dwelling or granny units. I myself want to potentially bring my mother to Petaluma as well to keep her close. So it's a great policy, but it actually only helps an individual family versus helping with the overall community in general. So other things we can do, we can reimagine commercial or industrial areas that are underutilized and potentially have some residential areas in there. We can have density bonuses as well. And one of the other issues is that Petaluma historically always did a great job with redevelopment monies. Obviously, the governor took that away 5-6 years ago to balance the state budget. With the new governor coming into place, we can reach out to the new governor and hopefully have a new redevelopment part 2 that we can leverage the city for more
Thank you.
options. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make sure the camera doesn't cut me off this time. So basically, with the housing issue, we have to do, it's kind of a 3-pronged approach in terms of what you need to do is build more housing to help people, and that's really the only way you can solve it. But we have to build housing smart. We can't take away from the charm of our community, so we have to be really careful with how we do it. But there's a couple different things we can do. So first, there's density bonuses Mr. Harris talked about. Density bonuses essentially encourage a developer, and we allow them to build more units than the zone allows. So it's actually a really good way to build that affordable housing on site using density bonuses. The other way is streamlining the permitting process. If you streamline the permitting process, so say some developer comes to us with an idea that's going to fit with affordable housing, and they fit our guidelines, we can actually make the process much quicker, smoother, and cheaper, which means cheaper housing. So that's another process. And then the other thing is we can do fee reductions for developers that include on-site housing. Because this is the thing, we want to make it cheaper. By raising the inclusionary housing fee, we actually made housing more expensive. Because essentially we said, hey, you got to put 15%, so everyone else in that development is going to pay more. So we have to be careful of the unintended consequences.
All right, I've been told to announce that the bar is now open, so it's in the back there. Anyone needs a drink? Don't everyone go at once. Great, that was a great responses from that. Thank you very much. For question 2, we'll start with Brian. We'll go down the list and then we'll come back to Dave. Question 2. Medical marijuana has been legal in California for more than 20 years. Voters in 2016 approved Prop 64, which legalized recreational cannabis and allowed cities to set their own policy regarding the drug. Some cities permitted recreational cannabis dispensaries and collected the added tax revenue. Petaluma banned dispensaries, instead allowing 2 cannabis delivery operators. Do you think Petaluma's current cannabis policy is working, or are you in favor of reversing the ban on dispensaries?
I'm looking to monetize the cannabis industry through local taxes and permits, which comes with the added bonus of more jobs, especially with the recent layoffs of Lagunitas. It would be nice to replace the lost jobs. Our community has been an agricultural-based economy for generations. It makes perfect sense for us to embrace the emerging market of cannabis. It will soon be bigger than wine. The sooner we get on board, the sooner our community will benefit as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have actually been a leader, even when it was back in the medical marijuana days, and now that it's adult use of marijuana, I have led the fight to first allow for the medical dispensaries, and now to actually bring in the businesses that will bring taxation ability to our city. I think we are leaving money on the table, and I really think it's important to try and get taxes from almost every other group that you can before you start talking about taxing the people of Petaluma through a sales tax or a property tax. And I have actually been a leader on that. I think the cannabis industry really lends itself to that. I do think it's a clean industry if it is done right, and that is part of what we can regulate, and I definitely support that.
Thank you.
I think we should reverse our ban in Petaluma, but I think we have to be really mindful from a planning perspective where we put and allow those dispensaries. They should not be in downtown. I think we have a lot of space on the east side potentially, but I think we have to be careful on where they go. This is a tough issue because we have to balance public safety and public health concerns. And so if you look at it from a public health standpoint, a lot of youth are using cannabis at an early age, which could lead to other drug use. So this is a real concern. So cannabis could bring in more money, and we could try to earmark that for other uses, such as for public safety or for roads. And I think that's something we should take a look at.
Thank you.
You know, I came in a little late on the cannabis discussion, so I asked the chief of police here in town, said, what's their take on the situation? And he said, what the council passed currently works. It works currently. And I said, well, why would we change? And started exploring my own thoughts of why we would change, and it's to chase a taxation money. So now we have a choice. Do we want to chase this taxation money from this group, or try and solve our multiple financial problems more broadly, more evenly? I'd rather wait and see. I wouldn't change what the city has for its cannabis ordinance at this time. I'd like to wait and see. Other cities are all facing this. We'll learn a lot if we're paying attention to all the communities around us.
Thank you.
I'd like to start this. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'd like to apologize to my grandmother right now for my response. We've had some conversations about this. So, I've talked to many residents about this, and a lot of them go to Katati to buy their medical or recreational marijuana. I do not partake myself. That's not my thing. I think we're leaving money on the table. I'd like to see the taxation of it go to public safety, especially with DUIs on the rise and any medical related things that happen with marijuana use. I'm not an expert on that. But I would also like to see maybe some money deferred to drug counseling to prevent youth into using it as a gateway drug. But it does have medical benefits, and you know, there's money there to be had, so it's something to look into.
Thank you.
I guess I got to talk about my grandma too. In 1969, I was going to Montgomery Ward's in Richmond to buy tickets to a Rolling Stone concert. I needed 8 tickets, but one person could only buy 4, so I took grandma with me. And we're standing in line, and the whiff, the knowable smell of marijuana wafts up from behind us, and grandma says, "What's that?" "Grandma, that's marijuana." She goes, "Hoo." The city needs multiple new streams of revenue, and I believe we should look further into bringing a marijuana dispensary here to begin that process. As a physician, I feel that the public health effects of marijuana are certainly less serious than of cigarettes or alcohol in the long run. And I've seen it be beneficial in terms of medical marijuana. The issues come more for me with growing it and the issues associated with growing it.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to talk about my grandma. So I believe in the medicinal quality of some plants, and food is medicine as well. And I believe that we should bring a dispensary into this city. I believe that we are losing our tax revenue to places like Katati and to Sebastopol, and I don't think there's any reason to do that. And I think that having cannabis delivered is probably not a good idea from an environmental perspective. It's just putting more trips on our streets. And so I would support actually having a place to buy cannabis in our community. And I believe that we should regulate it as we do tobacco and alcohol. Right? So where we cite that particular location will be similar to where we cite alcohol and tobacco uses, so that we're sensitive to those uses around them.
Thank you.
So on this issue, we need to have a balanced approach. I know that the council has done the right thing in terms of having a delivery service. I'd like to wait and see for 2 years or so to see what happens from that. I'm struck with what our Chief Sabano has said recently in terms of 15 officers short, where we should be based on our population. So I'd like to see an analysis done of economic benefits of this, along with the negative in terms of the extra expenses that could come forward from this as well. So I'd like to have a balanced approach from this topic, have an analysis done in a discussion, and have obviously the historical aspect of this in the 2 years of the delivery service as well. So we need to have a balanced approach to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would agree on that. I'm not opposed to dispensaries, but I think we have to be careful not to chase the tax money in what are the unintended consequences, what are the negative consequences that come, and is it going to cost us more in our police force? And obviously our police force is doing an amazing job, so thank you. But do we want to tax them more? I mean, literally, the more responsibility for chasing some tax dollars. So we have to be careful of that. Then also in terms of policies, we don't necessarily need to be the pioneer. I mean, if you've ever watched a Western movie, the pioneers usually end up with arrows in their back. We have to be very careful. I mean, we do. We have to be very careful. There's a lot of other cities that are doing policies, so why don't we let them institute the policies, see how it goes, and then we take the best practices so that we not only save ourselves money, but we know what the unintended consequences are, and we can deal with it for that. So that's my answer to the canvas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we on yet? We're back. As a member of the council who supported having a limited number of dispensaries when we discussed this over the past 2 years, I still support that. I think we could go forward and have 1 or 2. The council as a whole decided to take a go slower approach to this. And right now, I think the policy is working, but in time, I think we should open the door to some dispensaries, and we do need to be careful about where we locate them. It's important to recognize that marijuana is legal. It's going to be an increasingly booming industry. It may be bigger than wine. It'll never be bigger than beer. So remember what office you're running for and what city, and who is here. And, but in seriousness, I think this is something that the police can get a handle on. We can obtain the tax revenue. It can be very extensive, but it's something that needs to be monitored carefully. I think eventually it'll go the way of prohibition, and we'll be able to treat it like beer and wine.
Thank you for that. This next question will start with Teresa. A lot of folks mentioned taxation and the budget, so let's talk about the budget. Petaluma's budget is dangerously lean. Over the past 10 years, Petaluma has reduced its staff by 12% and cut overall spending by $4.2 million. Yet pension obligations are projected to double in the next 7 years. Meanwhile, essential city services remain underfunded. Petaluma streets remain in poor quality despite an influx of new gas tax money. And the police department is down 15 officers. City-owned buildings and equipment have deferred maintenance. What is your plan to increase city revenue, and where would you prioritize spending it?
A minute? Okay, well, it's very interesting because if you look at our budget, we have as many police and fire as we can afford. But if you look at our city and our population, you can see that we have the same number of police and fire that we had when we had a city population of about 35,000. So how do we make up that difference? It's going to come through taxation. And that is a discussion we have to have that has to be very carefully done. Because we know that the first claim on money that we raise as taxes goes to paying the pension liability. This is something we want to do and we have to do, but we need to make sure that if we are going to raise taxes, we do it for a very limited period of time, for a specified reason, and in a way that actually enforces what is good in this town.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need to look at a taxation measure, specifically an infrastructure tax, looking at not only our roads, but our civic buildings. We have our police stations in the old mortuary. Our fire station was built in 1938, way before I was born, trust me. So we have major challenges if there is a disaster. All 3 of our fire stations go down if there's a 6.0 earthquake. That's a huge problem. So we have to go for a specific tax. I think ultimately the council, whoever is elected, we have a duty to come to you and engage you and work with you and be honest about these challenges. Because the challenges right now, if you looked at the animal shelter, the bathtubs, what was the common theme through that? People didn't feel heard, they didn't feel engaged with. We have to be out there talking with you, having town hall meetings, holding office hours, figuring out where we can find those priorities and be honest about what we're going to do, because we need the money and we need it fast.
Thank you.
Well, I concur the city's in a whole bunch of trouble. And first, we ought to give a real commendation to our outgoing city manager for having held it together for 10 years, decreasing budgets and decreasing funding and increasing need. And even to this city council for holding it together. Now, maybe we should chase an older city council for getting us in the pension troubles we're in, but for right now, this community has done well. But their goal for the last several years has been to have a revenue increase. Decreasing funding has caused us to know we need revenue, but it hasn't happened. I think it's the one thing that will solve our combined infrastructure and labor, our officers. The one thing we need to do is have a revenue increase. However, the one thing that people aren't ready for is a tax increase. We need to spend the next year telling the people what the issues are so that the people will support us. That's the key.
Thank you.
Oh, this is not an easy fix, and it looks like we're going to be throwing some kind of tax measure in there, whether it's public safety or infrastructure. What we need to do is bring business to Petaluma, something that's going to generate a whole bunch of income. a whole bunch of revenue. Something that's going to bring sales tax that's going to be regenerating every month. The city gets a check. Hopefully, not saying that the budget's a bad thing or the city manager did a poor job, but with a fresh set of eyes on it, we might be able to go through, look at it, and see what we can do. I'm not saying, no, I'm not throwing shade on anybody, but I'm just saying that with a new city manager, with a fresh set of eyes, we might be able to solve some of the problems. But we definitely need to start generating revenue in this city, starting with commerce.
Thank you.
Just to reemphasize, this is not an expenditure problem, it is a revenue problem. We have to generate more revenue in as many ways as we need to. I agree with some of the previous speakers that it's going to be very important for the council to come together, to make compromises, to come up with a measure that they can all get behind and that we can all go door to door for. I see no other way for it to succeed. It may be a bond measure, it may be a sales tax, that's something else to be considered. Again, as I said before, sometimes the medicine doesn't taste good. Thanks.
Thank you.
So our general fund budget is $47 million, and 70% of that goes to police and fire. Our revenue sources come from property taxes and sales taxes. We get 11 cents on the dollar for property taxes and 1 cent on the dollar for sales taxes. I would propose that perhaps we could have a tax on high-end homes when they change hands. So a one-time tax for single-family homes that are above a certain amount of money, a transfer tax, that might be an option as one way to bring in revenue. And I agree with the rest of the panelists that suggested that we have to go out to you as the community. I think we all need to understand and become educated about our budget. What are our expenditures? Where do they go? What are our revenue sources? And how to balance those, how to learn about exactly what we need to do as a city and come together to figure this out as a totality.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a huge issue facing our community. Our general fund back in 2008 was about $48 million. And after the downturn in the economy, it dropped all the way to $32 million. The new city manager comes in, we say, John Brown, welcome to Petaluma, now do austerity policies. So we had to privatize a lot of things from janitorial to the animal services to our planning department. And then we brought on Target, we brought on Freedman's. Target brought about $1.2 million a year. Freedman's was about $800,000. This is the entire center, not the individual areas. So that helps with the budget, and as stated earlier, we're just back up to $47 million. We're not even back to where we were essentially 10 years ago with all these other expenditures coming up. So yes, we do need economic development to help shore up the budget. There's some opportunities we have in terms of the fairgrounds, which I'm sure will be a very specific question later on, so I won't get into that. We have some opportunities along the river in terms of the river enhancement plan. But yes, we are going to need another revenue measure before the city. It's going to have to be very specific, and the new council will have to get together in February during our goal setting session and have that discussion before our first budget in May.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'm the only one that just doesn't say a tax increase is the only solution. I think before we go to the public and ask for a tax increase, we need to look at the city, what our efficiencies are. Are we hiring a consultant to make every decision for us? Why can't we make that decision ourselves? Why can't we do things within the city more efficiently? We have to have that conversation first. And if we can do it privately more efficiently, maybe we need to have that conversation. We have to do everything we can to be as efficient and cost effective as we possibly can before we go to the voters and say, hey, we want more money from you. So we have to have that conversation. Once we do it, if we get to that point, we can go from there. But we do need to look at how we can be more efficient, more cost effective. Just like years ago, we bought a street grinder. We didn't have anyone that could use it, so we had to sell it. Does that make sense? I mean, really, we have to be smarter about our decisions and be very smart, cost-effective in our city before we ever go to the voters for a tax increase. And the other thing is economic development. Bring more high-paying businesses and jobs into town. Obviously, that'll solve that problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our general fund is about at the same number as it was 10 years ago. We need about 8 to 10 new police officers, and we're losing them to better salaries elsewhere. We have a major fiscal problem in the city, and in fact, it is the issue. I don't believe you can look at our budget and say there's a lot of waste in it, or you need more efficiencies. What we need in the city is more money, and we need leaders who are honest enough to tell you that you're going to be the ones, along with me, because I live here too, that are going to have to pay it. Otherwise, our services are going to diminish significantly. We're not going to have the police force we want to have. We're not going to have the fire department we want to have. We're not going to have the parks we want to have. And we go on right on down the line. That's our reality. So we do need a tax measure, and we need the entire council to get behind it. It does need to be a finite duration, and whether it's general or special, the entire council needs to be behind it this time, so that people can understand that their leaders need them to pass the tax measure.
Well, I believe we need to first stop wasting money by doing projects and then going back to repair them because we did them wrong in the first place. No matter how much money we generate from revenue and new businesses, we will never make up for the deficit with these pensions. We all need to come together and figure out a way to deal with this pension issue or we're not going to get anywhere. I'd like to add a few brick and mortar dispensaries to Petaluma, have some delivery services, and get some permits and contracts out for distributors here in Petaluma with the cannabis industry. Until we do that, excuse me, we don't stem to get enough money if we can't figure out a way to deal with the pension issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Scott. The city owns 64 acres of land in the heart of Petaluma. The Sonoma Marin Fair currently leases that land for $1 per year, an agreement that is set to expire in 2023. Given that the City Council in the next 4 years must decide on the fairgrounds' future, what would you like to see happen with that property?
Thanks, Matt. I think the fairgrounds underscores the need for more transparency in our local decision-making process. We need to have more public meetings. We need to have more meetings with the Fair Board publicly as a city, and we need to bring people together to see what the visioning process looks like. We have a rich history in Petaluma of robust engagement on land use decisions. Let's not forget our past. Let's use that to plan for the fairgrounds. I think the fair should remain at its current location in some capacity, but something has to change. $1 a year is not a good deal for the city. Frankly, it's our land, and we need to look at multiple options from a hotel to some housing, but ultimately, we have to work with you, the public, to make it a viable solution that's long-term in the best interest of the city.
Thank you.
Right, I think we're going to hear that the city has an asset that's not giving them any economic benefit, but is giving a huge cultural benefit. So we need to keep the fair, but it needs to provide its fair share. And we haven't had city transparency about the city's agenda for what happens at the fairgrounds. So I participated in a group that for 6 months did a citizens effort on that. And we explored all of the different options from housing to convention center to civic center. We brought those ideas together. We invited in the schools from the fairground property. Robust public discussion is possible. It should be led by the city, but when it isn't, citizens step forward and they take matters in their hands. They would like the citizens would like the city to immediately say what its intention is. Well, we expect to have half the land back. If we have half the land back, we should immediately start a master plan, so when the 4 years runs up and we take possession of the land, we have a plan in place. Why wait?
Thank you.
The fair. Petaluma Central Park. Any kid growing up has a special place in their heart. With me, my kids, even all the way back to my grandparents. The fair is underutilized. We need to do something with it. I would like to see a true centralized city government, starting with the fair, maybe city hall, police department, and maybe a fire station in a small footprint, like a public safety campus. Using the police station and city hall for maybe sell those to developers for senior housing. It seems the least offensive in those neighborhoods when you have, if you put a 300-unit complex in there, it might, make some neighbors mad. Next to the police station, you also have a grocery store, so everything will be walkable and bikeable. And yes, have a good one.
Thank you.
Not to reiterate, but the city does have to get more than $1 a year from that land. Again, I think the fair can continue. I think it should continue, but I think that they can do that on half the property, and that half the property should be utilized for any of the different options that have been proposed by other candidates. I'm not wed to one option, although if I'm wed to anything in any respect, it's housing. I think there's room for more than one use for that piece of land. One thing that I'd like to spend a moment on is the Speedway. Some people want to keep it, some want not, some want to move it. I believe that we should not move the Speedway because it's going to have the same problem that gas stations have when you close them down. They've got leaking underground tanks, and if we move it, we'll have 2 of those areas to deal with in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I do believe that the fairgrounds is the most important piece of property that this city owns. And what I would like to see is us have the Fair Board and the City Council both appoint a body that will create a master plan for that site. So 9 people appointed by the City Council, 9 people appointed by the Fair Board, for instance, not wedded to that number, but so that 18 people are committed and have public open meetings over a period of 3 years to create a master plan and hear all viewpoints of everybody who has a vested interest in the fairgrounds to decide what happens with that property. It is our jewel, and we should be making these decisions collectively and together. I personally, if I were to have a voice, would suggest that it's a perfect spot for all of our city services. Again, move our city hall there, move our public works buildings there, our police, our fire. They have infrastructure that needs to be changed, and we could build it on that site, and it would be centrally located for all of us to come together collectively.
Thank you.
So this is going to be one of the biggest decisions we're going to have over the next 5 years. 45 years ago, when we entered into this lease, it was the edge of town, out of sight, out of mind. Now it's in the middle of town. It's one of the most valuable pieces of property. We need to keep the fair there as kind of a nod to our heritage. We need to reimagine that property. And there can be some economic development opportunities there. One of the ideas is to have a convention center where, of course, the fair could use it during the fair time, but then the city could use it the remaining 49 weeks of the year. You know, a week for the fair, a week to set up, a week to break down. We'd have the remaining 49 years. And while the train station is there, of course, for commuters, we're just uniquely positioned to have people stop here in the middle of our downtown to go to a convention or whatever it is going to be at the convention center. So it's an incredible opportunity, but we need more transparency in the process. We do need to have more meetings with the Fair Board. They're appointed by the governor, of course, and of course the people on the council and mayor that are voted on by the people of Petaluma. So we do need to have transparency in the process and bring the groups together to have a full discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, the park, I had a good conversation with the Friends of Kenilworth Park. They're trying to obviously save the fairgrounds, and they've endorsed me. So part of my conversation is, what are we going to do there? That's the biggest thing. So number one, we need to keep the fair. I mean, it's really an homage to our agricultural history. It's who we are, so we do need to keep it. But what other better uses could be at the fair? Number one, I would love to see our police station moved out of the mortuary and moved down there so it's centrally located, can connect with the entire city. That'd be huge. Also, City Hall is another plan. Move City Hall and the city services in the center of town. And then those 2 plots, the police station and City Hall, could be redeveloped into something to help our community out. So those are the 2 big things. Also, a conference center I think would be huge and is great for economic development, businesses bringing in their conferences and events here. But also think of safety. When we had the fire, where did we go? We went to the fairgrounds. If we had, a big indoor space where people could go in an emergency that would protect them, then that's huge. So that's why I think the conference center would be also awesome to have that in safety situations, but not fire. Fire needs to stay downtown because in a disaster we wouldn't be able to get to it. So fire would need to stay downtown.
Thank you.
Yes, I think the first step we have to take, or the step that's continuing, is continuing the negotiations with the Fair Board, the city and the Fair Board. What I'd like to see as we go into the next session is that 2 or 3 members of the City Council be appointed as part of the negotiating team. I'd like to see the fair stay on some smaller footprint. And once that can be worked out, the secondary step would be to bring that discussion out to the public to see what the public thinks about that. With regard to taking back the remainder of the land, which is city-owned land, I have my own ideas, but I think it's going to be a decision that's made by the broader public. It shouldn't be made just by 7 people who are elected for a short period of time, considering that the decision is going to be forever. forever. And one of the things I like to see there is something that generates revenue for the city, whether it's a convention center or something that we can move our city services to, but something that can regenerate income for the city and also be a central meeting place for the people in Petaluma.
Thank you.
Well, due to the fact that we've overpopulated the area and caused quite a mess after building the Target shopping center, I don't believe we can develop that area anymore. I don't see homes or anything of this sort going in. I would like to see a convention center and possibly a restaurant that's year-round for us to generate some more money, but I think the fairgrounds need to stay the way that it is. We're going to have to figure a way to work around it.
Thank you.
The fairgrounds is 62 acres right in the middle of our city, and it is our largest asset. I love the fair, and when we adopted the 2008 general plan, I helped put in there that we made sure that 20 acres of that stayed dedicated to open space and parkland, because even though the lease would expire before the general plan, I wanted to make sure that there was space there for the fair should it choose to be there. Part of that decision is the Fair Board's decision, and I would like to see the Fair Board and the City Council work together with the community to have that discussion about what goes forward. But we need to, having said that, we need to realize that that is a huge asset of the city. We need more access to that land, we need more income from that land, and we need to control that land. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. We'll start with Kevin. Let's shift focus to infrastructure now. The Rainier Crosstown Connector has been anticipated for 50 years. Caltrans has now identified a funding source to raise Highway 101, clearing space for the future roadway. Once the highway work is done, construction on Rainier could start as soon as 4 years, although the extension is currently unfunded. Do you think that Rainier should be a city transportation priority, and what would you do to advance the project?
Yes, Rainier should be a city priority. I mean, 50 years you promise something to the people, at some point you need to deliver, or you have no credibility. Wait, perhaps there's no credibility left on Rainier. But it is all about the funding. It's not the project that was promised to be at the original times. It's not an interchange. But since we have already put the $7 million in that's been referenced, and since we do have impact fees collecting in the bank, becoming less valuable every year, it's important that we find the answer right away. And if the answer is, well, future growth will contribute impact fees, tell the people how you get that dollar value on the table. When does the fee start coming in?
Thank you.
Oh, Rainier. Yes, Rainier. I've been hearing about it as long as I've been alive in this town. It seems like there was a kibosh put on it about 25 years ago because some people didn't want it in their backyard. Understandable, but I live off Caulfield, and people are talking about that now, and if they want to bring Caulfield, bring it. Bring it as fast as you can, but we got to fund it. I go back to Rainier bonds. I don't even know if that's a thing, but if we got to go door to door and sell them, that's what we got to do to make it happen. We're waiting for it. 60,000 plus residents depend on it, and the question is, are you really for Rainier? Are you going to leave no stone unturned, or are we just going to, use it as a, yes, I'm for Rainier because we're not going to commit political suicide? We need to make it happen, and we need to figure it out, and people say we might be at mercy of developers. We might have to make a little bit of a deal with the devil, but you know what? Our city's depending on it.
Thank you.
I'm against deals with the devil. I'm all for Rainier, however, except that also as an engineer, my calculations are that it can't possibly be done before 8 years from now. A minimum of 8 years, and that's if everything goes perfectly. And we need relief now. Everything that we need, all the things we need to do to get relief are discussed in the general plan and in the bicycle plan and the pedestrian plan. We need to get back to some of these things we've lost track of, I think, with all the emphasis on Rainier. We need to improve our bike routes and get some small percentage of people on bikes. My wife is not going to ride a bike, but I've taken it up recently, and we don't need to get everyone on bikes, just a few. We need to talk more about sharing rides, even going downtown for the day, and we need to also consider traffic engineering. Thank you.
Well, I absolutely agree that we really need more ways to get across this town from east to west. It's becoming increasingly difficult. People aren't coming to our downtown because they can't get here. It's too inconvenient. And in our general plan, we have the Caulfield connector, which would connect Caulfield over our river with a drawbridge, and we have Rainier on the books as well, which is said it's been in the books for 30 years. I'm not sure it's going to be built. We don't have the funding for it. We have about a third of what we need to get it built, and I don't foresee when in the future, if another 30 years before we actually have the funding to be building it. And I do absolutely agree with Dennis that we need to find alternatives. Let's fix Corona. That's an issue already. Let's find out more ways to get across town with public transit, with bicycles. Let's improve the Washington crossing so we can get across that on a bicycle. I think spending this kind of money on infrastructure, which is a 30-year-old plan, our world is different now. We don't build 1.8 mile structures.
So this is one of the biggest issues facing our community. Traffic in town is terrible. A lot of people that I've been talking to as I've been going door to door talking to people that say, it takes me half an hour to get across town. That's why I don't go downtown. So we need to fix that. We have momentum with Rainier. I heard all the chuckles at the beginning when that subject's been brought up, but we do have momentum on this. When Freedmen's came in for their entitlements, we got the two acres set aside next to the dog park for the plan line. We have traffic mitigation fees that have been set aside for that first phase. We've coordinated with Caltrans and split it into 2 project study reports, one for a crosstown connector in the future and interchange. We've coordinated with them, and when 101 is built, we'll coordinate with them and build Rainier as well. The other big issue is Proposition 6, which puts all of that in jeopardy, which may be a question later as well, that if that passes, then 101 funding is in jeopardy, which then puts Rainier in jeopardy, and actually has road maintenance funds in our road maintenance fund earmarks in our budget in jeopardy as well. So we have momentum with Rainier, and we need to keep going forward.
So I just want to raise some hands. How many people drove here today? I just want to ask. So the thing is, we can't keep pushing it off and saying, oh, it's going to take 8 years to build, 10 years. I don't care. We need to keep pushing for it because Rainier is something that's been in our general plan for a long time. It's going to help a lot of people. And we need to do that. Now, I always hear the funding. Yes. So we do have a lot of money in our traffic mitigation fees to do that, but this is the thing, vote no on Prop 6. Right? So when if you do not repeal the gas tax, we can actually bond off that to help pay for Rainier. So that is something that hasn't been available for a long time that now is. So it's one of those things, and then I hear dealing with a developer and the devil. I don't believe developers are devil. That's the wrong way to look at it, because to me, when we got Target, we also got Kenilworth Junior High School out of it. So to me, that was actually a win-win. So we have to look at opportunities that we can win-win. If development needs to be done, development impact fees, with bonding off SB1, there's a lot of things that we can do, but nonetheless, I do want to push for Rainier, and it does need to get done as soon as possible, even if it takes 8 years.
Thank you. Let's hold our applause till afterwards. Thanks.
I thought they were applauding because I stood up. Anyway, I'm only responsible for the last 3 years and 10 months of 450, but I do support it. And in the course of the term I've been on, we've done 3 things. We've passed the environmental impact report for the Rainier project. We've recently entered into 2 contracts, one with a person to go out and negotiate land purchases with the landowners in that area, since the city does not own the land that the road's going to be built on, and a minor engineering contract. We do have some money in the traffic mitigation funds, and some of the construction costs will come from development fees, but we do have to be creative in the future to figure out if we're going to be able to complete this project. I agree, vote no on Prop 6. The gas tax is vital to this community. And in addition, $85 million has been allocated to widen the freeway which will also make the Rainier project go forward because it's going to come under the freeway. But we are making some progress. It is a slow progress, and it'll probably be built incrementally.
Thank you.
Well, I hate to rain in your guys' parade, but I don't like traffic either, but Rainier is never going to be built. It can't be built in the location that it's been shown for the last 50 years. My great-grandfather purchased Denman Flat in '44. We weren't supposed to build on Denman Flat. We caused serious issues by doing it. If we continue to build on the south end of Denman Flat, we will continue to cause more issues for Petaluma. We are not going to have that overpass. We're going to have to fix Corona, work on Caulfield, and figure out other ways to get the city functioning properly so traffic dies down, and we can't add more people.
Everything possible that can be done needs to be done to deal with the gridlock that is in Petaluma with our traffic. But having said that, we have to look at what is achievable. When I hear words like momentum and we're making good progress and we have money set aside for the start of this, it's just a lot more of trust me on this. We have been trusting people on this for 50 years and we are no farther along than we have been. We need to have a solution to this problem, but the way we are going to get to that solution is by talking about how we are going to fund a solution. And that needs to be done, that needs to be on our council priorities in February, because without the funding, this is never going to happen, and these are hollow dreams. There has been a deal with the devil, and the devil is the promise that we will do this without really funding it. $22 million is really a drop in the bucket.
Thank you.
So I'm in strong support of Rainier, and if elected, I would be an advocate for it. And I think that's a key. We need advocates on the city council finding solutions to traffic, finding solutions to congestion. When I think all of us here, we've met with the Chamber of Commerce during our campaign, and that was one of the key questions. Not only do you support it, but will you be an advocate for it? And I will be. And here's the deal. Petaluma, we have all these old fights going decades and decades and decades. We need some new perspectives and new energy to break through that gridlock and to get stuff done. We have to get results for people because you demand it, and you should. Broken promises aren't acceptable, but we can't keep having divisiveness on these issues. In 2004, the voters overwhelmingly passed an advisory measure to support Rainier in '04. That passed 80% to 20% in favor of Rainier. Why are we still debating it like it's an afterthought? We need to look at how we can get the funding. There's the impact fees. We can work with the property owners on the west side of that development, and we should keep all options on the table.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Robert, you will start with this one. Let's talk about fireworks. Everybody loves fireworks around the 4th of July. Nonprofits benefit from the sale of fireworks. Yet in this time of increased wildfire risk, fireworks are becoming increasingly dangerous. The City Council recently talked about banning fireworks, but they put off the decision until after the election, so the next City Council will have to take this up. Are you in favor of banning fireworks in Petaluma?
Well, so some of my best memories were lighting off fireworks on the 4th of July with my family, but since we're on the 1-year anniversary of the most horrific disaster in our area's history, I think it would be a good thing to ban the fireworks in Petaluma, because it takes one misplaced sparkler to put this whole city up in flames. It's not, I mean, it's a tough decision I would make, but a city that came together when we had the horrific events a year ago, I'm pretty sure we could come together and find some way to support the nonprofits and come up with alternative ways for them to make money to fund their, the football or whatever thing they're trying to raise money for. I just think we shouldn't tempt fate at this time, and maybe it's a temporary thing and we check how wet the grass is, but I would vote no.
Thank you.
I'll admit that even as a kid, I didn't like fireworks that much. When I was on the board of Mentor Me some years ago, I was still on the board, I believe, when the question of a fireworks booth came up. And I was against it then, but outvoted. And it has been a good source of money for Metro Me for funding. And I feel for that. I'm against fireworks. I think we should ban them. I think the climate is getting warmer all the time. And everything else is changing in a way that makes fires more and more likely. And we've all suffered enough from it.
Thank you.
So I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and I remember going to a 4th of July party with my family, and there were a group of kids, and we were setting fireworks off across a roadway, and it was Alaska, so it was pretty rural. And I remember then we heard fire trucks, and I was like, oh, what do we do? And none of us knew whether it was ours that actually set that fire off, or if it was somebody else's, and I still live with that. It's like, was that my fireworks that I put over there? And my dad was in a decision-making position in Anchorage, and he actually banned fireworks after that. And in honor of my father, I too would do the same. I think in our current environment, given the air quality, given what it does to our air quality, and this climate change, given, again, the safety issue, that I absolutely would ban it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've actually worked at firework booths in the past. It's obviously a big profit center for some of the nonprofits. However, now in terms of where we are, what has recently been happening, we probably do need a phase-out period at this point for the fireworks. On top of that, I heard that there has been a move to potentially put a referendum on the ballot so that people of Petaluma can weigh in on that subject. So I think that might be an appropriate step, which would give the nonprofits a phase-out period to come up with other alternative ways to raise monies, to backfill the monies that they would raise for this, but ultimately we should move on for the fireworks being sold in town.
Thank you.
Yeah, the fireworks are obviously a big issue. You know, we just went through the huge fires in Santa Rosa. So what we need to do first is work with the nonprofits, because last I checked, they raised about $100,000 from that. So we need to work with the nonprofits first, find another revenue source. Once we do that, then we can have that discussion about an outright ban, or does the city want to see maybe only certain areas like the fairgrounds that you can light your fireworks. So we need to have that discussion. So I'm not necessarily for an outright ban at this point. I think we need to have that discussion of, again, working with the nonprofits to find a revenue source. Then if we do want to ban them, have that discussion, or just say, look, it can only be in this area, because we already restrict a lot of areas as is. So maybe if we want to make that even more closed, where it can only be fairgrounds, only certain areas, I'd be open to that, but I'm not for an outright ban at this point. But I would like to see the restrictions definitely in the future.
Thank you.
Well, we had this on our agenda for City Council in the last couple of weeks, and I supported a fireworks ban. I have supported it for a number of years. I would like to see a period of a year or two for the nonprofits to be able to adjust. There's 13 of them, and they make anywhere from $3,000 or $4,000 to maybe $10,000 or $12,000 per year from these sales. When the fire department head comes to you, when our chief comes to you and says, we need this, we can't distinguish between illegal and legal fireworks, and there's a serious problem with our increase in service costs throughout the city, and when your county has burned and the county next to you is practically burned down, I think it's prudent and smart to listen to the leaders like the fire chief and ban it. On the other hand, let's be real, there is a fireworks industry and there is concern about this, so we may wind up having to do a referendum in the city in 2 years about this. But I did vote to support that, or actually we didn't vote for it, I supported it.
Thank
you. Well, it's time to ban fireworks. We have a beautiful fireworks show every year in Petaluma. People still get to enjoy 4th of July. It's not the time or the place anymore to continue lighting fireworks off. And I'm guessing with this crowd of individuals we have here, just this group, I'm sure we can figure out a way to raise $100,000 between the individuals in here to give to the charity, to give to the folks that are going to miss out on the money. I don't see $100,000 being raised very hard with the amount of folks that own businesses and have the abilities to make that happen here in Petaluma. So fireworks are done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also support and have for quite a while supported the ban on fireworks, and I think that David did a very good job in pointing out why. because, you know, we don't need to tax our already taxed public safety people, sending them out on searches for the sources of the problems that disappear as they get closer. It's a problem we can easily eradicate. The nonprofits, I have been approached by members of the boards of several nonprofits who have told me they so regret having gotten involved with the sale of fireworks. The amount of money that is made by fireworks sales really goes to the manufacturers of the fireworks. Nobody makes more than 30% of the sale prices that they sell. They can sell $50,000 worth of fireworks that we are all exposed to as a community, but what they actually make out of that is $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. That's not worth the risk.
Thank you.
I would support a ban of fireworks and a phased-in approach. I think we need to give the nonprofits time to adjust to the new reality that we can't have these sales in our town. And I think a 2 or 3 year implementation period makes sense. I'm on the board of directors for the Public Library Foundation. Fundraising is one of the hardest things you can do as a nonprofit. If you're on the board or you work for a nonprofit, it's one of the, besides providing services, it's really hard to raise money. But there's a lot of rich tradition in Petaluma supporting charities and nonprofits. We can work together with the city to work with these charities, to support them. But the fire risk is too great, the strain on our resources is too great, and it's really hard to enforce fireworks between legal and illegal with the fire department and police force. It's incredibly hard, and it's a strain on our resources.
Thank you.
Yeah, I too think that the time for fireworks has passed. I mean, I had a lot of fun as a kid growing up in San Francisco and getting fireworks in Chinatown. That time has passed. And regarding nonprofits, and I ran a nonprofit. I ran the Petaluma Youth Soccer League. We sold candy bars. It's different, but in candy bars we got 50 cents on the dollar. We had 3,000 kids. Do you know how much sugar we put in this community? Yet at some point we figured out that the burden of running the fundraiser was more difficult than the profit. And we found that both of the membership supported getting rid of it, and the community as a whole, we knew we didn't want to fund a candy company. We just wanted to run a soccer league. We have a great asset in Petaluma. It's people. Because people can find a solution to this. Replacement of money of this magnitude is not the hardest challenge facing this next city council.
Thank you. This next question will start with Dennis. California's minimum wage will increase in steps to $15 per hour in 2022. Yet some cities are accelerating the steps, getting to $15 per hour earlier. Do you think Petaluma should increase the minimum wage to $15 per hour ahead of the state increase?
Yes. This, along with our housing issues, you know, this is another way to get at the affordable housing issue, that you can either reduce the price of the housing or increase wages. And for that reason, I would support definitely raising the minimum wage almost immediately, halfway to 15, and then to 15 the first of 2020. As well, this moves along with, well, with all the other housing issues. I guess that's all I would say about it.
I absolutely agree. I am also in favor of increasing that wage to $15 an hour, our minimum wage, which actually equates to about $30,000 a year. That's not really able to afford a house with that kind of money. So that's at a minimum. And I agree with Dennis, it should be phased in over the next 2 years ahead of the state. I used to be a retail store owner, and that was in 2006 when I opened. And I paid my employees a minimum wage of $15 when they started, and then increased that wage, and that was for retail sales. I think it's just the right and just and fair thing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't support accelerating the minimum wage the additional 2 years. I think we should stay on the track what the state is doing. I don't want to put our businesses at a competitive disadvantage out there, so I think it's very important to follow what the state is already doing and not accelerate, so I wouldn't support that policy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I don't want to put our small businesses at a disadvantage. I'm not opposed to raising the minimum wage. We just have to have the honest conversation of what the economic realities are and the unintended consequences. Raising the minimum wage and faster as you put businesses at a disadvantage, but you also, it's inflationary. right? It makes things more expensive, so that $6 hamburger now is $7, $8. Not that we can't do it, but just realize there are unintended consequences, and I think we should look at the economics behind every decision we make. And again, if we as a community decide we want to do it, then great, we can do it. I'm not opposed to it, but realize just that study the unintended consequences and how to make it more expensive for all of us in the long run. So just be open to that.
Thank you.
Yes, I do support accelerating and increasing the minimum wage. I was surprised when the legislature passed the law that it was going to take as many as 5 years to get to $15 an hour. $15 an hour is not really a living wage, and I realize there's entry-level jobs involved here as well. But there are many people who rely solely on that type of wage. I believe here in Petaluma our wages have increased because our unemployment rate is extremely low, and that type of pressure tends to raise wages. I have a pretty good idea what people make for a living in this county, being an employment lawyer for the last 30 years here. One of the questions I asked them is about their earnings, and I have noted that they are increasing, but I do think we do need to have a floor so that people can have a decent wage.
Thank you.
Yes, we do need to make this happen, and we do need to make it happen now, as well as figuring out a way to get better jobs here in the community that pay more than $15 an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also support increasing the minimum wage, and I have been a long-time proponent of a living wage ordinance that we have in our city. I find it very interesting to hear people on this panel talking about streamlining development fees and cutting costs for developers, but holding back on the idea of giving a minimum wage to people who are struggling here in this town. I find that if you're giving it to one, if you're taking it away from one and you're not making the developers pay their fair share, then basically you're shifting that cost onto the city, the people who live in the city. A minimum wage is a minimum. You're eating into my time. Anyhow, we really do need to address this. This is only fair and just.
Thank you.
We have a poverty crisis in California. It's real, statewide. Now, in our community, we're doing pretty good. As Councilmember King said, our employment in Petaluma is very low. But here's the reality for Sonoma County. For a two-parent household with 2 kids, they need to make about $81,000 to actually make ends meet. That's higher than the federal poverty line. So these are actual real standards of living. Well, guess what? They would need to each make $23 an hour. So we're not there yet. So yes, I would be in strong support of accelerating it. We need to support our working families. And certainly $15 isn't a living wage, but it's better than $11. And so we have a responsibility to our people here to support people. We need to stand up for folks so they don't leave Petaluma. We want folks to stay here. We're a vibrant community. People want to come here. People want to work here. So let's help them out. Let's accelerate the minimum wage.
Thank you.
Yeah, I too support the accelerated effort. The state's effort includes cities like Barstow and Bakersfield. Cost of living there is way different. What we have here, we should be ahead of the state's curve because our costs are higher than the state's curve. That would be the first part of that. The second is I've asked small business owners. My son's opened a small business in town. And he said, give me a level playing field and it'll be fine. It'll all work out. And we've been approached, probably most of us, by Marty Bennett, who's pushing this as a regional solution. And I think if you get something through on a regional basis, all the cities agreeing and the county agreeing that's the minimum in our county, it is a level playing field. And really, that's all any business wants, is a level playing field.
Thank you.
Oh, I absolutely think we should accelerate the minimum wage because a rising tide raises all ships. You know, I started a family during the Great Recession, and the wages have been stagnant ever since, and cost of living is skyrocketing, rent is going up, and the wages are just creeping. And this is, I definitely think we should accelerate it, and just because unemployment is down doesn't mean people can actually have a living wage, as Teresa said, and I think we should get this $15 implemented as soon as possible.
Thank you. We'll We'll have one more question before the closing statements for the council candidates, and then we'll do the take a break and have the mayoral candidates. So this one's, Delinda will start with this one. What do you think about the proposed Water Street public art installation featuring bathtubs on stilts?
Well, what I have learned from listening to what's going on next door, people send it to me, I actually don't listen, but what's really brought home for me is the lack of the ability for our community to be involved in our processes. Our communication efforts, I believe, are really falling short, and I think that next door has actually filled that gap, and it's a gap that I think we as a city are responsible to fill. I think starting with our website, let's make that's a low-hanging fruit. Let's make that a little bit more accessible, and let's provide a way for people to actually become involved in the city and know what's going on, and a better way to communicate with people and harness this energy that people have about our public art process.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I supported the ordinance about 10 years ago or so to add the 1% fee to the developers that came in, which created this pot of money. Now we have some incredible art in town near Freedman's. They've added their art in there. Even over by Logmeads, they have some art. And art is very subjective. But I don't support the tubs art on Water Street. We do need to scrub the tubs, and I think the bathtubs belong at home and not on the Water Street Promenade. Personally, it's funky. It could be out in your peninsula, but unfortunately, it takes away from some of the real estate on Water Street as well that could hamper other events in the future. So I don't support it.
Thank you.
I think this answer really simple. No, I do not support it.
Thank you.
Thank you. As many of you know, this came to the council about 3 months ago. So when I prepared for that meeting, one of the first things I did was go back and read the ordinance. And the ordinance provided zero role for the city council in judging the art. In fact, I don't think you really want to have a bunch of art experts on your city council. If you listen to the questions we had, and I'm certainly not there. I admit it. I am not an art expert. But I did look at the process that was done. I looked at the actual law, and I determined that the Public Art Committee was the decider here. We could certainly improve our public input, but I will say that we landed here, and how we got here, it was a 4-year process with many public meetings. Apparently not enough word got out, and that's a situation that can be improved. But I actually don't. I would tell you, my opinion on the art piece is irrelevant. My job as a council member is to follow our law and also respect our processes, and I did both.
Thank you.
The bathtub project looks like a beautiful piece of art. That's the wrong location for it, as well as the wrong community. I was under the impression that the art project was supposed to represent Petaluma and the people that have been here. Bathtubs on stilts do not do that. There's individuals that I see in the room that I would like to see a memorial rather than a piece of art of bathtubs. It doesn't represent anything that has to do with Petaluma, and it's an insult to injury when we don't have a public restroom downtown Petaluma and we're planning on spending $150,000 on putting bathtubs on stilts in the air right where homeless people hang out that don't have anywhere to take a bath. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to talk about homeless people taking baths and bathtub art at the same time. But I will say those are different pots of money. And I think David has absolutely said the correct approach to this. It isn't really about how I personally feel about this art. It's how I feel about the public process. And perhaps we could have had a bigger outreach. I'm not sure how that would have happened. I know I attended a number of meetings over 2 years, and I know this went through an iterative process. But the point is to follow the rules of our city, and we do need to do that. one of the things I've heard on this council over and over is, well, we need to talk to the public, we need to find out what people feel. Yes, we do, and I have that, I get to do that a lot because people reach out to me all the time. But we are the people who you are going to elect to make these decisions, and that's what we should be doing.
Thank you.
I think the biggest issue with the bathtubs and issues like the animal shelter really call out a need for more transparency and accessibility with local government. Most people that I talk to when I go door to door, their first council meeting was the bathtub meeting. Can you imagine that? That's kind of chaotic if that was their first time in with local government. So we need to harness that energy, bring people in. There are a ton of volunteer commissions and committees people can serve on and apply for, and you can get appointed. I was appointed to the Planning Commission. It's a volunteer position. So I trust the process that the art committee had. I can't Monday morning quarterback unless if CJ Beathard's my quarterback now. But I think we have to be honest that the Public Art Committee had 3 or 4 years of public meetings on this, and just now it caused a stir. I think that looks at the structural problems that our local government has, where we need more input and we need to hear directly from folks, not just at a Monday night council meeting, but here in downtown, on the east side of town, in central Petaluma. We need to get out and meet you where you're at, not just you coming to us.
People at every door say, what's your position on the tubs? And I say, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that we can't solve a problem like this. How are we going to solve bigger problems? For the 4 years that Dave mentioned that this has been in process, 2 of those I was on the Public Art Commission. At the end of that 2-year period, we had candidates that were posted in the Argus, and all 4 options were shown. Little Eggs in the River, etc. We had a lot of public forum, a lot of stakeholder meetings, a lot of outreach and advocacy. At the Ice House, there was demonstration of the art, etc. Anyway, none qualified, none met our standards. We took the lessons learned, and I got off the art commission, unfortunately. but they proceeded with it. That location is in the city's plans for improvement. It's a blighted, neglected, troubled corner and needs something to happen there. I don't want to lose art improvement at that corner because the particular art is not well accepted.
Thank you.
Well, talking to the thousands of people in the last couple months, I'm going to roughly guess over 9 out of the 10 people I've talked to are not for the art project. That's not a very good margin. If it was 50-50, we'd have an argument. But if we wanted to put something for our rich history flying over Water Street, and maybe a memorial to Fred Wiseman's airmail flight or something like that, I don't want to interject my personal opinion about the art because it's irrelevant. The meetings were held at private businesses. I thank them for doing that, but it's kind of seems like home court advantage. If a normal, average, ordinary person were to walk in there, they would have been educated, or they would have been told to leave. That was everybody's general perception of it. I am not for the art because I would have liked to have seen it to go to a local artist so they can turn the money back over to our beautiful community. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I talk to people, I find it about a 50-50 split between people for and against this art project. That's neither here nor there, I guess, but and I'm also interested in the fact that although I was not involved on the commission or on the city council at this time, that the old adage of a picture is worth 1,000 words. It seemed to me that the opposition crystallized after the first picture was in the newspaper. I could be wrong about that, but that's the way it seemed to me. So I think that again is more evidence that we need better outreach if it's at all possible. I'm sure we would have better outreach if this comes around even next time it's considered and between now and then. I've been pressed over and over again for my opinion, and some weeks ago I felt like I had to say what I would do if I had to vote at that time, and that was no, to give people another chance to pay attention to what was happening by the art committee. But I'm a very weak no, and I appreciate anyone that would like to talk to me further about this.
Thank you. And that is the end of the questions. So thanks everybody for the opinions. council candidates, just the council candidates, will now have 1 minute to make a closing statement, and then we'll take a short break and convene with just the mayoral candidates. So 1 minute each for each of the council candidates, starting with Dave King.
Well, thank you. This is the part of the show where we ask for your vote. And our job is to represent the entire community. Not some narrow interest, not any business interest. So I'm not going to make a plug for myself, but I'm going to ask you to recognize that I've been endorsed by our congressman, our state senator, our assembly member, our mayor, and 4 of my colleagues on the city council, as well as several people on commissions and other elected offices. I believe I got those endorsements, as well as all the other people that are listed on my website, community leaders and those who live here, because I'm a fair, open-minded person who does not vote in any block on this council. I made a steadfast effort 4 years ago to be the person who didn't join a majority or a minority. I believe I vote on each issue. You've listened for an hour. If you can pin me down, you're a genius. I hope you vote for me, but if you don't want to listen to me, listen to the people who support me.
Hi, I'm Scott Alonso, again, candidate for City Council. Thanks for everyone for being here. And I think it's really important to remember, there's 7 of us, you get 3 votes. So I hope to earn your consideration for that. Voting actually started today. Ballots are going out in the mail. Please visit my website, alonsoforpetaluma.com, and my email is scott@alonsoforpetaluma. So please visit my website, shoot me an email, find me on Facebook. Let's get together and chat. I think if I'm fortunate to be elected, I'm going to bring a new perspective, some new energy to the city council. I'm a renter. I live on the east side of town. I'm the youngest candidate running. Don't let my gray hair fool you. But the reality is, we need some new energy. I have experience at the state level, the county level, and serving on the planning commission. I think we can do a lot of good things here in Petaluma. People want to be here. People want to serve. People want to give back. It's such an exciting time to be involved, especially with the national stage. But we can make the real difference here locally. Local government matters. It should matter. We can make meaningful change together, and I hope to do it with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Kevin McDonald and I'm running for City Council. It's great to have the opportunity to get in front of people and identify yourself and also distinguish yourself. And in my long time in Petaluma, I'm saying that it's the experience and accomplishments in Petaluma that matter. I've run a measure helping the city with its finances. I've been involved in that level, Measure X for parks in town. I've participated in the development process on the public advocacy side with our Know Before You Grow group. I've led nonprofit in town. I've participated in all these things. There's just so, everyone is well-intended, everyone has a good idea, but it's a question of, have you ever really worked and have you ever really accomplished a thing here in Petaluma? And I've learned my way through many of the commissions, the art commissions we laughed about, or the Park and Rec Commission. I've learned my way through all these and now find that I have the education experience for City Council. Please vote for Kevin.
Thank you.
Well, Scott, I'm going to take your line a little bit. I'm the 3rd oldest candidate, and don't let my gray hair fool you. I'm just a normal, average, ordinary, blue-collar guy. I'm going to name off some of my endorsements because I'm proud of them, because I pretty much had no friends coming into this. I have the Police Officers Association, Fire Department, the North Bay Labor Council, the United Healthcare Workers, the Teamsters Union, and the Latino Pact. And what all those have in common is, when you boil it down to that, we're all just working people trying to keep a roof over our head, food on the table, and get from point A to point B. So I might not be as polished as some of these pro politicians, because like I've said before, I am not a politician, I'm a Petaluman. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dennis Posegay, in case you forgot. I do believe we need to represent all citizens, and I intend to represent all those citizens, especially who have been chronically underrepresented. I think that there is, in our community, maybe a better word is institutional classism more than institutional racism, but I believe that all citizens in our city do not generally have equal power under the law, and I would want to change that. In terms of getting in touch with me, if you just type in Posake, you'll find my Facebook and my website. There's not much other stuff there. And my phone number, 707-478-7466, is on everything. It's on everything. And I have to say that as a physician, other physicians made fun of me for giving out my home phone number. It was used twice a year. Thanks.
Thank you.
Vote for me.
Hi again, Delinda Fisher, and I would really appreciate your support and your vote. I moved here 5 years ago, like many of the rest of you, because I was charmed by our downtown, by our historic river, by our historic city, and also by their access to their agricultural lands, our robust bicycle community. And I hope that everything I have said here reflects my experience as an urban planner and my desire to see this as being a more resilient and sustainable community, particularly in light of where we are in our global climate crises. And I did mention my endorsements before. I have a list of 10 of them. They are on my website, fisherforcouncil.com. I don't really want to give you out my phone number, really appreciate that, but I am always accessible, and mostly because I'm always on the phone for the work that I do, so it would probably just go to voicemail. But please email me or access me through my website. Thank you very much for being here this evening, and again, I appreciate your support.
Thank you.
So I'm Michael Regan, and I'm the second youngest, but don't let my hair fool you. But no, I just really bring a different perspective. Obviously, I'm younger. I've got a business that I've grown up from nothing to a very successful business, but I also have 2 young children, a 6 and a 4-year-old, so I see different, all different kind of areas, different areas of the city. I'm all over the city. So I get to see when Sonoma Mountain Parkway by the JC is falling apart and huge potholes. I get to see all the different areas of the city. So it's really a different perspective we haven't had. And also with my background, economics is a big thing for me. And I think there's a lot of decisions that we make just based on the heart, which is important, but we also need to look at the economics. So, again, people want to put me in pro-development, anti-development. I'm project specific. If it makes sense for our city, then we should do it and not be fooled by the devil in the details, those kind of things in terms of everyone's the devil. Let's look at what's best for the city, and that's what I can bring. And if you look at my endorsements, Supervisor Rabbit, Assemblymember Mark Levine, State Senator Bill Dodd, and 3 on our city council all endorsed me, along with our Petaluma Peace Officers Union and Fire. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your vote.
Thank you for that. And we're going to take a quick break, but first, thanks again for all the city council candidates. Sonoma County cities, and that we directly elect our mayor. While still having 1 equal vote among the 7 city council members, the mayor controls city council meetings and has a larger role in community functions. This year, 3 candidates, Brian Powell, Teresa Barrett, and Mike Harris, are running to replace retiring Mayor David Glass. So we'll have a few questions for these 3 candidates to get to know their leadership styles. And we'll continue the same way, 1, 2, 3, and we'll go down the list like that. Each person will get to answer a question first. Question 1 for Brian. The community looks to the mayor of Petaluma for leadership, and this is especially true in times of crisis. During a wildfire, an earthquake, or a mass shooting, while emergency personnel and city staff are on the ground responding to the disaster, the mayor will be expected to coordinate the response, provide the community with updated information, and console grieving victims. What leadership qualities do you have, and what leadership style would you demonstrate in responding to a crisis? And give an example from your personal or professional life in which you showed leadership in response to a crisis. We'll give you 2 minutes for these responses.
Well, growing up, I wasn't very good at leadership. I was quite a jerk as a child, and sports were my life. I learned over the process of 20 years of not conducting myself properly, how to conduct myself properly and be a leader. I've become a very good leader, and I've managed to put myself in a position to win, whatever it was that I was addressing. I have quite a understanding of the community, and I know the majority of folks here in town. When things get rough, I know that I can reach out to the people that need and make things happen fast. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Teresa Barrett, and the question of leadership, I think, is an important one. And as I understand this question is leadership and how you've shown it in a time of adversity. So I'm going to start with that. In 2008, I was on the council for just a little more than a year for the first time, and the world economy took a nosedive, and Petaluma was not spared from that. And we ended up having to really look very seriously at where we were going to go as a city. And we started cutting. And it was a very, very hard thing to do, but we had to do it or else we were going to be bankrupt. We came down to $5,000 of reserves. So how we did that was by looking at all the different aspects of our city, working with all the individuals who were leading the departments and asking them to figure out ways to cut their department and cut their department and cut their department. And finally, we got down to the bare bones, and then we had to decide what groups we were going to either have to privatize or do without. And I think that we made some very difficult decisions that we based those decisions on how much our city could do without those services, and also how we could keep as many people as possible on the city payroll without having a deficit. That was very difficult, but we were able to do that, and we have slowly been able to build the city up since that time. That took great courage and great leadership, and I think that we were very good in terms of doing that. At the end.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Well, I've been honored to be in leadership roles almost all my life. I've served on nonprofit boards, which I know a lot of people in here has as well. I'm an executive for a local financial services company, and I've been there for 26 years. I was honored to be on the city council for 12 years, so I have a lot of leadership background. I'll bring up specifically the fires that happened. It was essentially the one-year anniversary. Obviously, I was a private citizen, but the firm I work for, we have 170 employees there, and that morning we had 10 employees show up to work because everyone was dealing with that. So in terms of leadership, we had to deal with what a lot of our employees were dealing with, and 8 of our employees actually lost their homes, so we immediately had to fundraise for them to help them through the process. So we had to organize that as an organization. Now here locally, as a private citizen, you know, I've access to some social media platforms, so I was able to get information out to people, like a lot of people out here were doing as well, and get that type of information out in a timely manner that was correct and accurate information as well. So, you know, those are 2 types of opportunities where I showed leadership from my professional way and as a private citizen, getting information out in one of the biggest crises that ever happened in our area.
Thank you. This next question will start with Teresa. The mayor works closely with the city manager, the top administrator in the city, to set the policy agenda and prioritize major decisions. John Brown, our current city manager, has done an exceptional job leading the city through a difficult financial crisis. After 10 years at the helm of the city, Brown is due to retire after the November election. The next mayor and city council will be tasked with finding Brown's replacement. As elected mayor, what qualities would you look for in a city manager?
Well, unfortunately, we're already starting that search because Mr. Brown will be leaving in November. But we are involving and including the people who are running in this election now before we make the final decision, so that whoever is elected will be part of that decision. And I think that that was a very democratic thing for us to do, because we want to have buy-in from the new people on the council, not just the people who are currently on the council. Having said that, what we really need in a new city manager is someone with a very strong fiscal sense. That is number one. Earlier in discussions we had about the budget, there was some question about looking over the budget and maybe finding other areas where we can cut. I can tell you, having looked at that budget for the last 12 years, it is a very clean budget, it is a very transparent budget, and it is a very thin budget. We are down to the bone, and we need revenue, but we need someone who can work very well in that area. We also need someone who has transit-oriented development experience. That is what we need in this city going forward with development. If we are going to have a sustainable future in this town, supplying the kind of housing that we desperately need in this city and that developers desperately do not want to provide. So we need someone who has that experience and can work with us and with the community to provide that. We need a city manager who is a good communicator and someone who can help us bring our city's IT department into the 21st century. We have had a very low-level IT and social media face in our city, and we need to bring that up to the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I made mention of it earlier when the economic crisis happened in 2008. We bring John Brown on board, and we said, welcome to Petaluma, now do austerity policies. So he's been here 10 years, and now what do we want to see in the new city manager? Me personally, I want to see someone who has an economic development background so we can grow our economic pie. We talked about what our budget was earlier, how it was at $48 million in terms of the general fund, dropped to $32 million, and now it's grown back to $47 million. So we're not even quite back to where we were in 2008. So I think it's very incumbent upon us to hire somebody with a strong economic background. Working with our economic development manager, if I'm honored to be the next mayor, I can work with them as well. Number two, someone with a budget acumen, because I've studied our budget, our 398-page budget for our 2018-2019 fiscal year. There's not a lot of fat in there. I would challenge anybody to review it, but we do need a city manager, whoever he or she may be, that has a budget acumen as well. Working with them, that would be very important, especially as when we get into the goal-setting session in February, and then ultimately the first budget that comes before the council in May. I would say third, a city manager that's out in the community and has the ability to communicate. John Brown, does a good job. He comes to the chamber event once a year, but I think as a condition of hire, this person needs to be out there in the community, go to more chamber events, go out to the rotaries, talk to these people. Everyone knows John Brown's name because he's been here for 10 years. For a while, people didn't know who he was. He's the CEO of our city, the face of our city, along with whoever the mayor may be as well. So those are the 3 points I'd like to see in a new city manager.
Thank you.
Well, I wish I could tell you guys that I got John Sherrar to come back, but I can't. So I'd like to see someone that's born and raised and has children, has a track record of success running a city, and the main factor is knows the difference between right and wrong. If Mr. Alonso wasn't running for city council member, I'd probably be calling him trying to get him to be our city manager. Very smart young man.
Thank you. Next question from Mike. Partisanship has led to a divided city council on many important issues over the years. Do you think that it's the mayor's job to build consensus among the council on key issues? If so, how would you work with other council members to build consensus? If not, why not?
Sure, I think that's incumbent upon whoever the next mayor is to build consensus, because it's not one way or the other way. Usually you have a whole process in place. It goes to the planning commission. There's outreach into the community. When I was on the city council, one of the things I was known for was reaching out to the opponents and proponents of an issue, talking to them. They may not have liked where I landed, but I reached out to them and had a discussion. And with that background, I would love to be able to opportunity to do that as the next mayor. With that said, a specific example that I can point to in the past when I was on the city council, we had something called the Community Impact Report discussion, which we kind of made into the fiscal economic impact assessment. Now the unions, they wanted a whole other entitlement process. The businesses said, oh, you can't put another process in place. Well, I think we found a nice middle ground in that whole process, and we came up with a fiscal economic impact assessment that wasn't an additional entitlement process. However, it gave the council more information when they were reviewing projects. For instance, When Target came before us, we had the FEIA that discussed the $1.2 million coming to the council if that was approved. And the Freedman's project was $800,000. By having an FEIA in place, that was great information to have that full discussion. However, through that process, we were able to find a middle ground. It wasn't what the unions wanted, a full entitlement process, and it wasn't what the business wanted, which was no process. We found a middle ground. And if I'm honored to be the next mayor, I'll hopefully bring that type of leadership to the decisions that we have.
Thank you.
This is one of the most difficult things for individuals to make happen. I understand this. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to become adults in the room, and people are going to have to work together. It's going to be the only real way to get the things solved that we need to make happen. My approach, and this has been my approach whether people like it or not, is I will be putting serious pressure on individuals to make sure that they're looking out for the community and no other private interests. So pressure is basically is going to be my stand. I'm not going to put up with absurd voting.
Thank you.
The question of consensus is really important. I think that in general, our council has not been as polarized as that question might lead people to believe. It certainly has not been for the last 4 years. The 4 years that we are finishing up right now have seen a lot of cooperation on the part of the council, and we have moved forward on a lot of issues that we didn't have progress on before. For example, I have long been a proponent of a transit-oriented, a TOT tax. These two always get me confused, but the tax for hotels. And I have been a strong proponent of that. And there's never been consensus on our council for that. There's been too much pressure from the hotel industry for them to move along. But because I did not give up on that, and because I gradually got people to see the importance of why that was a very low-hanging fruit that we needed to add to our pot of money for the city before we go out and ask people to pay taxes, we now have a compromise of a TID that is the hotels themselves have brought up to give the city some money and help work on some expenses that the city was doing, and they will take care of. That's one example. The cannabis industry is another example. I was a leading proponent of that for years, and finally this time we actually were able to work together as a council because we have respect for each other and we're not stuck in someone's pocket or in someone's, and I mean that metaphorically, and or in some ideological place where we just can't move away from that. So I think that consensus is important, and I think I've demonstrated it, and it's because I take the long run view.
Thank you. We'll have one more question. We'll start with Brian before our closing statements. This is a forward-looking question. Growth and development in Petaluma is one issue that seems to set the three mayoral candidates apart from each other. Describe your vision for how Petaluma should grow, and what will the city look like in 5, 15, and 30 years?
Well, I'm against growth. I'm not against all new development. I'm against new development that results in population increase. I also believe it's a mistake to build at the top of a real estate cycle. It would destroy the equity Petalumans have in their homes. I'm not looking to stop existing projects except for Safeway and the project on Petaluma Boulevard. What I'd like to see in 5 to 10 years is the same city you see now. We cannot add any more people. The city wasn't ever intended to hold more than 50,000. We're over that now. We're filling the fishbowl beyond what we can repair. We keep creating problems by adding people. If we keep doing that, we're gonna not have enough money to fix the problems, and we're just gonna be chasing our tail. I'd like to see Petaluma stay the way it is. We've already overbuilt for what we have here. We have a slough and a river that runs through the middle of 2 mountains. This is as many people as we can maintain and sustain. Thank you.
Yay. You don't want
I think that Petaluma needs to step back and look at the projects and the programs that it developed 20 years ago. We had the Central Petaluma Specific Plan adopted, and that was a city core-based development that promoted walkability, density, support for our downtown core, no reliance on cars. This can be something that we can look forward to that can provide the kind of housing that, as I said earlier, we desperately need for our businesses, for our schools, for our city. And we also can have that kind of housing that is transit-oriented development. And people can take the bus or the train if they need to work elsewhere. That kind of housing provides much less of an impact on our community than putting 70 houses out on the corner of D Street and Windsor, where everybody has to get into their car for every single thing they need to do. That is not the kind of development we need. So it's not a question of not developing, it's a question of developing smart. We've already adopted these ideas. We just have not had a council majority that is willing to put those into action, to really show leadership. And I think that we need to do that now.
Thank you.
Excuse me, still battling the flu, excuse me. So we have a bunch of plans that have already been established and passed. I was honored to be on the city council back in 2003 when we did pass the Central Petaluma Specific Plan that gave rise to the revitalization of our downtown core, including the theater district. So that's been a great addition that we've had that's now 15 years old. We also have the station area plan that has been developed. We also have the general plan that dictates our growth, our managed growth through 2025. So we have our plans in place, and now we need to attract the business to town to actually implement those plans. One thing in that, thinking outward, is that we need more transit-oriented development in our downtown core. We're uniquely situated to have the train in the middle of our downtown core, and now we have the station area plan, and it's an incredible plan. Now we need to attract the capital to actually build that out. So future thinking, we need to have more development in our downtown core to help those businesses in the downtown while simultaneously giving some more housing opportunities in our downtown core.
Thank you. And before we move on to the closing statements, let's just thank our candidates for sticking around. Okay, we'll have 1 minute closing statements, starting with Brian Powell.
The future of our town is in some major trouble. The major issue at hand is keeping Petaluma from going bankrupt in the next 4 years, in conjunction with repairing infrastructure the right way. In the 38 years I've been living in Petaluma, we have never been in this dire state of affairs. Bankruptcy is the path we are on. A vote for me is a vote for our town's future. I see the writing on the wall, and it reads bankruptcy if we don't get our act together. We need to take control of our town back. We're losing it, and we need to act now. The quality of life in Petaluma continues to suffer. I believe a fresh voice, a Petaluma born and raised candidate with a child is just what the town needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank the Argus and the Chamber for hosting this, and thank you to the Hotel Petaluma, which has provided this fabulous venue, and I'm sure many of us can remember when this was not so fabulous. So thank you very much, and this is, I think, exactly the kind of economic development and restoration we like to see in our city. I'd like to say that, you know, I believe that running for the mayor of this city is an important step. And I think it is the only thing that the people of Petaluma have a direct vote on. You get to vote for 3 people to go onto the council, but you only get to vote for 1 person for your mayor. I think that I represent the values of most of the citizens in this town, and I would like to be your voice on the city council as your mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So So thank you again for having this forum tonight. So thank you to the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce, the Petaluma Argus Courier, and Hotel Petaluma for this informative forum tonight. I was honored to serve on the Petaluma City Council for 12 years. And like I said earlier, I'm an executive for a financial services company here locally, and I've served on a bunch of nonprofit boards as well. So I think I have the right balance and mix to be your next mayor. Some of the endorsements I've had is across the political spectrum. I've been endorsed by Supervisor David Rabbit, State Senator Bill Dodd, Senator Mark Levine, the Petaluma Police Officers Association, the Petaluma Firefighters Association, along with our current Sheriff, Rob Giordano, and our Sheriff-elect, Mark Essig. And again, my home number is 773-3196. I do turn the ringer off around 10, so they can just call me anytime. But for more information about me or other contact information, just go to my website at harrisforpetaluma.com, and I would be honored with your support for mayor. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. Thank you again to all the candidates for sharing your ideas and for the city and for your willingness to serve the public. And thank you to you, all the public, for staying engaged and participating in our democracy. The election is November 6th. Don't forget to vote.